Another month has passed and it's time for more video game pickups. Now I have dipped into a genre that I don't tend to dip into much these days, and actually, in my own East Ayrshire dialect, you might hear someone say to me, "Jinx Crivens, you fair went a bit daft with the frightening games." But if you don't understand what I've just said there, then you just wait until after these. Now firstly, congratulations if you managed to decipher that bit of Ayrshire dialect. If you didn't, however, here's a more basic translation for you, because I basically said in my Ayrshire accent that I bought a lot of horror games this month. But I'm not going to start with the horror games, that's a completely different subsection all to its own. Where I'm going to start today is with prizes and gifts. And yes, you did hear me correctly, I did say prizes, because I did manage to win 2 prize bundles over the last short period. And the very first prize bundle came from, well, I'm not going to tell you, I'm just going to show you a clip right here.
Go Marvin! Yeah! Number 20! It's number 20! I should remember that. It's Generation Pixel! Generation Pixel, you have won.
Now if this is not already part of your weekend routine, then you should go over there now, check it out, because it's such a wonderful community and hosted by the outstanding Jace, who will keep you entertained from start to finish. But enough with the waffling, and let's get on with the games that were actually in this prize. And the first one, we have the Ninja on the Sega Master System. Now this is a game that I did want. I've talked about it before and quite recently because I won it in another prize just recently, but that's another story. This one came with the Retro Games prize, and do you see this discoloration there? That's all me, don't worry, that'll all fade and die away. That's just WD-40 and a little bit of label remover, because right in this section here was a welded on price label. Now I really hate people, especially retailers who should know better, for putting on labels on the paper artwork itself. This should dry up, it will be acceptable, it'll be acceptable for me. And as I said, this is my second copy of the Ninja. I will, however, find a home for the other one, because I don't need 2, and I'm sure there's someone out there that would appreciate a copy of the Ninja and the Sega Master System for their very own. The second game that came with this particular prize was this here. It's an Atari 7800 game, Jinx, in a lovely plastic protector, and not only that, the game is sealed and new. Now I don't have an Atari 7800, not yet anyway, and I don't think this is going to be staying with me. Actually, I think this one is going to be rehomed with the wonderful Retro Bear. That's if he drops me an email and says, yes, please send that my way, because as I say, I don't have an Atari 7800 at the moment. It's not a machine I have nostalgia for, and I know he can make much better use of it. So drop me an email, Mr. Bear, and this will be winging its way to you soon. Now next up we have a gift that came from the wonderful Ross over at Bahaha, and it is Super Paper Mario. Now anyone again who's watched the channel will have noticed that I recently played Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door for the very first time not that long ago, and it absolutely captivated me. When Ross got this in a bundle and he didn't need it, he asked anyone who wants it. I said, well, if you don't want it, I'll take it, and he sent it to me. So Ross over at Bahaha, go check him out, because he's a wonderful channel and he's a wonderful chap indeed. He sent this along, and I'm quite ecstatic to have that in the collection now. I haven't had the chance to play it yet, but it is on my to-do list and I'll get there eventually. Now that the space is clear for the next selection of games that I've picked up over the last 4 or 5 weeks, it's time to what I hinted to at the introduction, and that is the horror games. Now, horror games aren't my thing, they haven't been my thing for a very long time, but there are 3 very specific people out there, namely Mark over at Geordie Slasher Gamer, or whatever he's calling his channel these days when he actually runs his channel, the absolutely wonderful Zelda Pop, who you can catch over on Instagram, and is also the better half of Ross from Bahaha, and last but not least, the incorrigible Jen from Retro Rivals. These 3 combined over the last little while have given me a sort of taste for horror games, and I thought it was time to bulk up the horror collection. So sticking to the usual format, we will start with the newer games first and work our way back to the older games as we go. And the first one I picked up was Back 4 Blood on the PlayStation 5. 5. Now, I know this is not supposed to be a great game, although Marcus over at Dad and Lads Gaming absolutely raved about it. I'm sure he did anyway. But I had to pick up this one because, well, Left 4 Dead was something that we didn't get on the PlayStation scene, obviously. It was Xbox only, and this is a sort of Left 4 Dead, well, spiritual successor. This one, of course, it came in a lovely steelbook, nice slipcase, and you know what? Steelbooks are another thing that absolutely get my attention when I'm walking past them, so there was no doubt I was going to pick up that. And talking about steelbooks, the next game I picked up is also a steelbook variant, and it's a game that I should have picked up much sooner because it's Resident Evil 8 Village. As I said, I don't really go into horror games much these days, but I do love the early Resident Evil games, and I'll still have the ones that I don't like, such as Resident Evil 4, in the collection anyway. This one I've heard good things about. It's one of their first person, and this now has a third person option, so I'm really interested in maybe sticking my teeth into that one. That might be quite interesting, playing a Resident Evil in third person the way it should be, maybe. But regardless, it's Resident Evil. I had to come into the collection anyway at some point, and why not get the pretty steelbook version? And talking about Resident Evil brings me to the fact that this is the first time that I've ever picked up Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. Now, I have played it before. I mean, I believe it's been free on PlayStation Network and things like that. I played it on VR, which absolutely terrified me, and it was probably one of the reasons I decided not to pick it up physically. But you can't have a PlayStation collection without a Resident Evil collection, and you can't have a Resident Evil collection if you don't have all the mainline games. Well, that was my justification for it anyway. I doubt I'll go back into VR to play that because it really did scare the living daylights out of me, but I may sit down and play the main game. You never know, we'll see. Now, although I did break the format there and pull out a PlayStation 4 game, which I'll slide over there, it was Resident Evil. I had to talk about them side by side. The next one is the last PlayStation 5 game that I picked up that is a horror game, and it's one that I know very little about other than it's supposed to be going back to the good old days of survival horror, and that is Tormented Souls. Again, can't talk too much about it because I've never played it, but I'm sure if it's got even shades of that original survival horror from the 5th generation, then I'm going to be all over that. I think I might actually get round to playing that before I play some of these other horror games. Now, if there's anything I like to get stuck in, it's an absolute theme, and because I'm in this horror kick at the moment, and also because of this wonderful Tormented Souls, I decided to pick up Demia, the Black Edition. Now, this is another game that claims that it goes back to the roots of survival horror. Haven't played it myself, it gets not very good reviews, but when did that ever stop me? I love some of the worst games ever made, and this is either going to be a decent recreation of old school horror games, or it's going to be a totally bad game. And either way, that's absolutely fine with me. Now, the next one, still on PlayStation 4, is a game that Jen over at Retro Rivals has been banging on about for a very long time now, and that is Days Gone. Now, I have played a little bit of Days Gone, and I did pick this one up, one, because obviously it was horror, and two, I do trust Jen over at Retro Rivals, but also, it's a lovely steelbook edition, and you can't beat a good steelbook. Well, I'm getting that way anyway. I don't know why I'm starting to take this notion for steelbooks, but you know what? It's what we do. We start down a rabbit hole, and that's what happens. Now, as I said, Days Gone, I played it for a little while, but I think I kind of tried to play it like a Fallout game. You know, it's this wonderful big open world. The problem with that in Days Gone is you can end up right in the middle of a horde of zombies and they absolutely annihilate you. And that's exactly what happened to me, and I just said nope, sat down the controller and moved on. I will get back to Days Gone, but when, I don't know. Now, next up is a game on the PlayStation 3, and it's a horror game that I believe Jen from Retro Rivals hasn't played yet, and that is The Walking Dead, and this is the Game of the Year Season 1 edition. Now, this is such a good game and such a good series of games. I can't go into too much detail because it's all about the story, but if you haven't played the Telltale games, then get them played. And The Walking Dead was a franchise that kind of died off for me when it came to the TV show, but the Telltale games are absolutely fantastic from start to finish. Yes, I played them digitally. I'm on the lookout for the physical copies, so that's why The Walking Dead Telltale's in the PlayStation 3 is in here now. I'm so happy to have that one. Now, next up is a PC game, and it's probably erring on the side of not quite horror, but horror themed happened anyway. And Mark over at Geordie Slasher Gaming, he had this whole problem when he was collecting for the PlayStation 2 horror subset. What games do you actually count in the horror subset and what don't you? Well, sometimes it's personal opinion. And for me, this game here, Alice, or America McGee's Alice, definitely fits into the horror genre subset. It is a game that I haven't played yet because I haven't really spent much time on PC gaming after 1995, but after playing the exceptional Alice Madness Returns on the PlayStation 3, recommended again by Jen, and I know I keep dropping Jen's name, but she is a horror junkie, I just had to pick up the first game, and I will get that installed onto the PC and have a proper look at it. Now, last up for this mini horror extravaganza, we have a game on the PlayStation 2. Again, a bit of a tenuous link. Some people would argue not horror. Most people, I would imagine, would argue for the horror subset, and that is Quake 3 Revolution on the PlayStation 2. Now, it's a game that I wouldn't have played back in the day, and it's a game that I'll probably struggle to play today. And the reason for that is, and many people will tell you, because I've had this conversation time and time again, I get motion sickness with older first-person shooter games. It's all to do with the frame rate, I believe, but it happens. I play for half an hour and then I'm straight to the porcelain telephone, then calling Huey, as we'd say in Scotland, and you can look up that reference if you don't get it yourself, but quite frankly, they make me sick. But I will give it a go and I'll see how long I last before I'm on the vomit comet, and who knows, maybe this is one of the rare examples that I can actually play through. I doubt it, knowing my experience, but that's something that I'll have to see with time. So there's a selection of horror games that I've picked up over the last few weeks, and drop down into the comments if you want to talk about any of these games. As I've said, I haven't played a great deal of many of them, so your input will be invaluable, even if it's just encouragement to try old first-person shooters and get Quake on as soon as possible. Now, next up is the selection of games that I picked up that didn't quite fall into the horror subset, because that was quite an unusual one for me. I think most of you will agree. But we're moving on now to the games that you most likely associate me more for. Again, we're starting with the newer games and working our way back to that juicy vintage at the end. And the very first one to show you is Octopath Traveler 2 on the PlayStation 5. Now, I haven't played this yet and I won't be playing it for a while because I've just started playing Octopath Traveler. It is a fantastic game so far. The art style is absolutely stunning and the game mechanics are just up my street. So, Octopath Traveler 2, very happy to get that into the collection, and that will be getting played probably sooner rather than later. Next up, we're moving on to the Switch, because the Switch is a system that is definitely starting to win my heart in a big way. And the first game for the Switch I'm going to show you today that I picked up is the Gianna Sisters Twisted Dreams, and this is the Ultimate Edition. Now, this isn't for me, I'm going to be frankly honest for you. This is for the better half, who is not only much better, much superior at platforming games than me. That's the type of game that she loves to sit down and play and get frustrated at and swear at a lot. And I might even record her doing that sometime. That would be quite amusing. I don't think it would be PG-13, but I'm sure some of you might like to experience that, because I have to experience it on a nightly basis. Next up, and still on the Switch, but definitely not for the better half, because this game is a JRPG and the better half does not play JRPGs. I picked up for myself Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, and this is a game that I should have played a long time ago. Again, I'm a Sony pony. I've played Sony from 1996 onwards and didn't really dip into the Nintendo library, not even back in the day when people were playing the NES and Super Nintendo. But this one gets such good reviews and people love it and people keep banging on about it and need to get around to it. So it's in the collection now, and it's one that I'll get to, and I'll be able to play it back to back with the likes of Octopath Traveler 2, because one's handheld, one's on the big screen, and I do play more than one game at the same time, so I can see Xenoblade Chronicles getting played sooner rather than later. And the same can be said for the next game, because this was a game that Tom over at Sega had absolutely recommended wholeheartedly, and it's Live Alive, or Live Alive, or Live Alive. Who knows what they wanted to call this and why they called it this, but that's what they called it. They called it Live Alive. Again, it's an RPG, it's an older one that's just had a nice new remaster, first time released in the West, I believe, and this one I'm thoroughly looking forward to, and again, mostly because Tom over at Sega had heartily recommended it, and he has never steered me wrong yet. Next up, we're moving on to the PlayStation 4, and it's not just one game, but it's two games, because it's this wonderful dual pack of Vanquish and Bayonetta, and this wonderful steelbook. I mean, absolutely stunning. I couldn't walk past that. Nice and complete in there, this in fantastic condition, and it's a 10th anniversary bundle launch edition. I couldn't walk past it. I haven't played Bayonetta, it's not my kind of game, the hack and slash. I will get round to playing it, especially now that it'll be easier to play on the PlayStation 5 than it would have been for me to drag out the PlayStation 3 and play it on that. And Vanquish, never ever played. So looking forward to playing that at some point soon. Moving on, we're moving down to the PlayStation 2, which is one of the main focus of the collection, and yes, you'll probably have seen over the last few pickups that I'm moving away from that. I'm not as laser focused on the PlayStation 2 pickups at the moment. I'm starting to branch out into multiple systems, which is something that I'm glad that I'm doing, because it's giving me much more variety in the game room. But yes, there's always going to be some PlayStation 2 pickups, and the first one is a subset game that I wanted into the collection, and it's Sims 2. Now, Sims on the PlayStation isn't the greatest way to play it, but I love The Sims. I loved it on the PC back in the day. I'm not so much of a fan of the newer ones. I think they're far too microtransaction-y and far too, you need to buy the next expansion pack and the next expansion pack. I think it's just too money orientated at the moment. But back on the original ones, and obviously ones on the PlayStation 2 aren't going to have those same flaws, so I'm looking forward to giving The Sims 2 on the PlayStation 2 a good chance. Now, next up, and still for the PlayStation 2, is a game that I absolutely could not walk past, and you'll understand why when you see it, because it's beach volleyball, summer heat, and from the wonderful Acclaim. Now look at that artwork, how could you walk past that? And then of course you get onto the screenshots at the back. This is a game that just absolutely begs to be in everyone's collection, and I couldn't walk past it. I'm sure you couldn't either. Lovely and complete, it was in wonderful condition, and this is one I will definitely be putting a lot of hours into as we go through the next year. Now enough of that nonsense, and on to games that I'm bringing into the collection for specific reasons, and let's get down to licensed games, because I do love a good, or I do love a bad licensed game anyway. And here's one that I managed to find for the princely sum of £1, and that's Shrek the Third. Again, I haven't played the Shrek games, so I'm looking forward to diving into them. I might even do a little video on the Shrek games, because obviously I'm a big fan of Mike Myers. Most people are, if they've got any sense and taste in comedy.
Oh, you're going the right way for a smack bottom, and I don't care who knows it.
But I haven't played the Shrek games. I know it's not his games as such, but who knows, this might be funny. It's probably not, but we'll have a look at it and we'll compare it to the other ones out there eventually at some point. Now, next up is another licensed game that I had to get into the collection, because not only is it a licensed game, it's a license from a license I adore, and it's also a genre I adore. And we've got Battlestar Galactica on the PlayStation 2. Now, I haven't played this one myself yet, but I am looking forward to dipping into this. I'll probably do some gameplay video on this particular one, because it's Battlestar Galactica. Grew up with Battlestar Galactica on the TV, and not the new one with, Katie Sackhoff as Starbuck, but Dirk Benedict, the proper Starbuck. So, Battlestar Galactica, looking forward to getting into that one at some point soon as well. Next up, still on the PlayStation 2, but a genre that I adore above all others, and that's RPG, more specifically JRPG, and we have Breath of Fire Dragon's Quarter. Now, I remember playing this back when it came out and didn't enjoy it. I can't remember much more than the fact that I didn't enjoy it. I did sell it on eventually, and I've had to get it back in because I'm collecting physically again, and if you're collecting physically, you need the physical. The digital just isn't the same. This one, I don't know when I'll get around to playing it again. I maybe should play a bit of it soon just to see why I didn't like it, see if I've changed my mind. I loved, obviously, the original Breath of Fire games, especially 3 and 4. I've played the first 2 as well, and I know some people don't like them. I'm pretty sure Pete Fire didn't go on with the first one, but it's my kind of shtick, and I enjoy them anyway. Next up, and still a JRPG, but one that I've never played before, and it's from a series that I haven't really put any time into, and it's Wild Arms, and Wild Arms 3 in this case. I'm looking forward to playing this. I don't know if the PlayStation 2 editions were better or worse than the original PlayStation editions, But Wild Arms 3, it's one that I haven't played, one I obviously don't have in the collection until now, and looking forward to playing that as soon as possible. Next up, we're moving down a generation and onto the PlayStation, and that's right, you won't hear me calling it the PlayStation 1, there was never a 1 in its title. If you're talking about the original PlayStation or the first release of a PlayStation, it's just a PlayStation, and the game is Wipeout. Now this is a game that I wouldn't have bought straight away, or not soon at all, it wouldn't have been on my radar, despite the fact that it has an absolute bible for a manual. And if I can get this out, you can see here, this is absolutely no joke when it comes to a manual. Now don't be fooled into thinking that Wipeout's a complicated game or a complex game in any way, shape or form. Because of that manual size, it's quite simply every language known to man is in that manual, and that's why it's so big. Everybody knows Wipeout. It's a classic racing game. It's one of the most important racing games because it was so maybe ahead of its time when it came out. It definitely changed the landscape, but for me, I wasn't going to buy it, but there was one reason to buy it, and one reason alone, and that's because if we can focus in here, 00010, it was one of the first 10 games that was released on the PlayStation. Now that wasn't something that I was interested in myself until, of course, Iron Man 2T UK came along and pointed out these silly numbers at the bottom of these games, and I just needed to get it, just needed to get the first 10 games. It's the silly things we do as collectors, but it's one of the silly things that I'm doing just now as well. Now next up, still on the PlayStation, and it's a game that I've been looking for a while now, and quite happy to get into the collection, and it's Vandal Hearts. It's the first of the Vandal Hearts games. It's a strategy RPG. I absolutely adore this. I won't be talking too much about it just now because there'll be another couple of videos probably on this, and at least two anyway. So Vandal Hearts, for anyone who knows, tactical RPG, fantastic game, and that is now into the collection. Okay, so I've cleared away the table because there's one item I want to show off all on its lonesome because it's something that I found to be a little bit unusual, and that is Metroid Prime Hunters First Hunt. It's a demo on a Nintendo DS. I had no idea there was such a thing as a demo on a Nintendo DS. Now I'm sure there's a lot of you fanboys out there from Nintendo who will say quite happily that yes, they know that these games have demos and these systems have demos. I just didn't know. Now this is not something that's probably going to stay in my collection. I bought it for the novelty value. If there's anyone out there who is seriously after this little thing, then drop that down in the comments, let me know why, and maybe I can post this out to you. But this was just a little oddity that I wanted to show all by itself. So there you go my friends, that's the selection of games I picked up over the last 4 or 5 weeks, and what did you think of that? Obviously drop down into the comments with anything that you want to talk about when it comes to these game pickups, whether I should have picked them up, whether I should have steered clear, or whether I should have picked them up a much longer time ago. And why? Because the interaction between you and me is what makes YouTube special. It does for me anyway. Now if you're new to the channel and would like to check out more content, then I'll drop up a couple of boxes here. One for the pixel years, which will show you my formative years in gaming, and down in the bottom more pickup videos so you can see how my video game collection has grown over the last 2 and a bit years. Thank you very much for watching as always, and until next time of course, cheerio!